Hey everybody, Miss Weaver here with the video for section 1.5. In this section, the big idea is all about bias. There are different ways that bias can be introduced into either the analysis or the collection of data. And so we're going to talk about that. And of course, hopefully you've gone through the interactive assignment in MyLabs Plus. And this will just kind of let you know what to really focus on and what I expect from this section. Okay, so as far as our ESO lens goes, the first level, the existence, all of these different types of biases are probably what I would just know that they exist. So there are different ways you can have bias enter in through sampling, so sampling bias. You can also have non-response bias. And you can have response bias. And as far as like the super deep details of these different things, I mean, just know that there are different ways. So, with sampling bias, it could be that you're not using proper sampling methods. It could be that you have used some sort of method like the convenient sample or voluntary response that we talked about in the last section. But maybe you chose your sample correctly, but then you have bias come in based on this non-response idea. So if you send out a survey to 1,000 people and 20 of them respond, then that's not good. So, this could be under coverage as far as our sampling bias, but it could also be non-response. And so but knowing whether it's one or the other, I'm not going to be that concerned with. Just know that there are different reasons and different ways that bias can get put in. And then, of course, there could be response bias from someone having to choose an answer that doesn't really fit how they feel or what they believe, but they have to pick one. So there are times when if you were asked, what's your favorite color, and you were given 4 options: red, yellow, blue, or black, and that's it. So, I really like purple, and I'm a fan of orange. I mean, none of those other colors, and then, of course, there's all these, in between colors too, magenta and fuchsia and chartreuse. And so, whatever your favorite color is, if you have to pick between those 4 and none of them are your favorite color, then that can lead to response bias. And then, of course, there are also, you can't, if you have a kind of an open response, you can't control if someone tells you the truth or not. So if you're trying to collect information and it's not necessarily an opinion, you could try and get biographical data from someone based on so that you can see if there's a connection between age and opinion. Well, someone could just straight up lie about how old they are for whatever reason. Or they could just be a mistake. They could end up, now I don't think you can mistake your age, although for a while I told people I was a certain age and it was actually almost 2 years older. But it wasn't because I was trying to trick people to believing I was 2 years younger. It was just because I hadn't really thought about how old I was. So, mistake or intentional, there can be some response bias in there as well. So that's, as far as existence, just know that there are different types of ways bias can get introduced, and that should be sufficient for anything we're going to do. There is something, however, that I really want to make sure that you take away from this class and hopefully hold on to beyond it. And that is that bias exists in data. So there are lots of things that we try to do to help remove any bias. And we'll talk about these in our designs of experiments in our next section and in the next set of videos. But there are lots of things we can try to do, but we don't always get rid of all of it. There are things that we should look for when we're reading data, when we're reading an analysis of data. If a milk farm advocacy group is publishing that milk is the best drink to have at breakfast, then that's going to have some bias, right? Because that's a commercial, that's not data, that's not analysis. And so if they get that from a neutral third party and they say, this nutritional group that has nothing to do with profits from milk production and sales analyzed data and decided, and here's why milk is the best thing to drink at breakfast. They can use that, but they shouldn't be collecting or analyzing the data themselves. So hopefully that makes sense. But you can always check for that. Where did the data come from? Who was asking the questions? What questions got asked? Right? The way questions get asked can be leading. And I've seen a lot of these. I always get from friends these surveys that their kids have to do for school. And some of them are like, well, don't you believe that, and then, whatever, is a horrible idea? Well, that's a very leading question, right? They're putting their opinion into the question and soliciting you to agree or not. That might be great for a conversation or a debate, but it is not good for data collection. So I want you to know and think about that when you hear the analysis of data, when you hear about surveys, etc. I want you to stop and think, where did this come from? Who gathered it? How did they get it? What questions did they ask? Is the source reliable? Is the analysis reasonable? Things like that. Okay? So that's the lifetime part of this section.